Our sincere apologies to be between you and lunch, but hopefully we can make it interactive. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and happy to be here. So a quick one, I think we're talking about ESG as a topic and how in a legal framework that comes at an intersection. Feel absolutely privileged to be talking to these ladies today. One, of course, an in-house legal counsel, and Vidie, from your perspective, you're an environmental lawyer. So just to kickstart it, like I said, I'm very curious to know, I think over the decades, we've all talked about CSR as a contribution to society, right? And I think we've all kind of have this a social stakeholder asking us, what are we giving back to the society as such? ESG norms have taken a different sort of a platform in the global world. We also have responsibility for top 1,000 companies, listed companies to report. What I wanted from your experience is, how does ESG and CSR as we know socially integrate it, and what's the responsibility, expectations from organizations?
Thank you so much for that question. So CSR, like you said, has been there in the legal, as a legal mandatory requirement since 2013. And the rules and regulations regarding CSR are crystallized. However, ESG is much broader term and CSR is a subset of it. So CSR is something, so if, like someone asked me what's the difference between CSR and ESG, I just like make it easier and say that you are obliged to do CSR if you are falling under the, the eligibility criteria of section 135, right? If you're making profit, you'll go for CSR, right? But ESG is not this. ESG is something that you still have to do, right? It's something not if you're making profit or your average profit is, a certain amount, then only you're required to do ESG. ESG is something, it's more than a legal obligation, right? It's something more, like when we say it's a way of doing business, it's actually a way of doing business. So CSR is a very, like a small component of ESG, which falls under the S category of ESG, whereas ESG is much more broader. It speaks to all the stakeholders and not just to the community. It's also to our, customers, it's also to our, say, so I'm representing a life insurance company, to also policy holders, right? And how are we even addressing grievances? And the last panel was about the data privacy. So data privacy is also a very crucial factor when we talk about ESG for the service sector. So, it's not that if we are taking in, the data from the investors, from the policy holders, and if there's a data breach, then we are falling short on the ESG front as well. So that's where I would say that, the CSR and ESG are different, because CSR is really like a sub-component of ESG, where it falls under the S category, but ESG is really, really broader.
No. Thank you very much for Vidie. Meeru, bringing you into the conversation from a legal perspective. When corporates are looking at ESG policies, in that sense, I think the drive largely started with a regulatory ask as such, right? But in terms of the legal teams, how are you thinking internally from an authentic sustainability perspective? What kind of policies should be there? And how integrated do you think the organizations are today in that sense?
Thanks. Thank you so much, and apologies again, being part or in between this and the lunch. So coming back to the point, I think, I'll be very honest, as what she rightly said, CSR, we end up doing it because this is mandated. ESG is something which I see there is a gap. People are not doing it and we should do it. Having said that, I think, the policy making and, we together as a part of the legal team, I think, the focus should be more towards making the policies, maybe from industry perspective together, looking as to which industry you are in and how can you help in totality to the organization, like CO2 emission, or probably, where you are throwing away your waste, where exactly you can contribute. So we together as an industry, as a part of the legal team, should may be part, first of all, try and convince your management, try and convince your board, make it as, part of your contracts with your suppliers, train your board members, train your management, and then represent to the board, then following by represent along with the industry to the government and try and make it a policy. And I have done it in past, may not be CSR per se, but more from metrology perspective, because I see and feel the people on the other side, and more specifically post-COVID, it's a unanimous approach everywhere. People in the government body also are open for your views. So it's like together, take an approach, go with the policy thought processes wherein you can make the contribution from your industry perspective, because I have realized recently that whatever is helping, you can contribute as an industry. Like I am working with BATA. So whatever I can contribute as a big organization, as an old organization, to the country per se in totality, and if I go to the policy makers and go with the representation, they are ready to listen to it. So if I talk about policy making, together is something which brings the change to bring the change for the society per se, is what I can say.
Perfect. I mean, I think thank you for the segue to really saying that I think it's a collective effort as such. But you also bring a very interesting point, and I'm going to come back to Vidie for that, to saying that there is still a long need to be able to convince your board, your management, beyond a standard of reporting, to be able to do that. Now, one of the things that we've seen in the West, I think there is a huge conversation about greenwashing. Yeah. So back to you from your passion point of view, Vidie, that while there are organizations, of course, we're saying that if you want investments, you want stakeholder confidence, we have to get better in projecting what our goals are and sort of moving forward. But at the same time, are we really looking at it? Do you think that organizations which are not really pushed from a regulation point of view, or organizations which are traditional, in that sense, is there a convergence that is happening in your view that you see as a ESG professional in that sense, with a very strong philosophy?
So, if I bring the jurisprudential aspect, so whenever there's a new sort of regulation which comes into picture, that's mostly through a regulatory requirement, and that is what has happened with ESG also. So it's in 2021 when SEBI said that ESG is mandatory for top 1,000 companies. Yes, right now it is mainly for top 1,000 companies, and the management of, say, like the top 500 companies, top 750 companies, are actually driving it very seriously, right? But to say that, is it has it gone down to SMEs, MSMEs, or even other companies which are outside the top 1,000 companies? I would say they will catch up to it gradually, right? And why was it that only top 1,000 companies were picked up? Because they work at a certain level. It's easy to upgrade them from, from the data collation, because ESG, if I can just put it, ESG is highly data driven. It's so much of data is required in it. Like if one needs to analyze data, synthesize data, and then to communicate to your stakeholders. But to collate that much of data, you need that system, and only top 1,000 listed companies as of now, even they are struggling to kind of reach that level. So this is something started from a regulatory aspect, yes, but it's now, maybe like there are a lot of researchers around it that maybe if ESG will not be called, say, ESG, say, 5 years down the line, it may be called as responsible business, right? But that is what it is. The term also has a lot of, debate around it, whether it will be called ESG, because what you're precisely doing right now, if I actually disintegrate E, S, and G, G has always been there in the corporates, right? The Companies Act, the secretarial standards, the G has always been there. S also pretty much is there, CSR was already existing. It's, of course, now we talk more about D&I, there's no laws per se, but yes, human rights laws were also there. So environment laws were also existing, but what new has come is that we're talking about the carbon emissions, right? So CO2 emissions, carbon emissions, greenhouse gases. So since I'm an environmental lawyer, I'm also bringing in the fact that we also have, questions around that, does India need a climate change statute separately? We have Air Pollution Act. We don't have a climate change statute, right? So, but the difference is that in air pollution, you only consider the particulate matters, PM 2.0, right? PM 1. So that's being considered. So that's why E is actually new in the sense that earlier we were not talking about how much of carbon emissions a company is generating with this business travel. Right? So E is new, but to synthesize everything together, it's amalgamation of E, S, and G, right? So come back to your question, I feel that ESG started from a regulatory aspect, and right now I would say it's at the nascent stage where the regulatory push is required to build it up even at a grand level. I mean, we do make comparisons to CSR, but CSR has been it's been running since last many years. So it's the rules and regulations have been crystallized. We have precedents if we want to look, how the funds have been disbursed, how the funds have been, utilized. So we have some data to look back to. Come to ESG, now the data synthesization is taking place. So maybe like 3 years down the line, we'll have SEBI, actually having data, and SEBI has actually, they are analyzing the data because it's now been 3 years that the data has been submitted. So maybe like 3 years down the line, we'll also have the ESG data being studied at a, much greater level than what it is right now because it's being collected right now.
Yeah. And I mean that's very progressive, and that's very heartening to see that what's coming our way. However, in a corporate setup, Meeru, this is for you. What I typically hear from my clients on the compliance, right? Because at the end of the day, there is a cost to all of this in terms of how you are going to make those investments, because all of this data collection will require technology. But there is a very large part of a third-party ecosystem that we are also as corporates relying on in terms of their governance, in terms of their environmental policies, in terms of their sustainable societal elements, right? And if I look at traditional industries, I'm not saying traditional companies, I'm saying traditional industries, which is very high on labor and third party, this thing, how much can you pass on to them? And those may not be at the scale and size for the top 1,000, but my ecosystem is large. And are they able to see the cost of compliance that we are asking them to do to start collating the data, because that's the data that's going to come to me. So in your view, having sort of a consumer product as such, I'm thinking of a large third-party ecosystem. How much is there push and pull on that front, and how does legal manage it? As in balance it, I won't call it manage it, balance it.
I'll be very honest with you, from a legal perspective, I can always put it into the contract that you have to do this. Right. These are the parameters, right. Please ensure this. Right. But considering the amount of work and the legal team obviously will not go deep dive and see. But then the practicality purpose of this is we should ideally train the people who are working with those subcontractors that are they doing those things which they are mandated to do. Mm-hmm. Half of the people, and this is not where I'm working right now, but my previous organization also, and I'm pretty sure many of us know that vendors work for us, but how many of us really go deep dive and see whether the vendors are doing those things or not, as what you rightly asked. So contractually, legally, I can bind them, and tomorrow if push comes to shove, I can probably terminate the contract with them. But you are asking me about the vendors. The question is, I'm sorry, I'm digressing from the question, but we all might have heard of a compliance champion within the organizations. Have you heard of ESG champions till now?
We don't have.
At least we don't have. We don't have in our company. Yeah. So this is the place where this enlightenment should be there. This enlightenment should come. So once we start getting it, the people down the line, the companies, other than those 1,000 companies, will start having it. That collaboration between the company and the third-party vendors will come. That champion, that collaboration, etc., will bring the change, which I think now is mandatory. It's mandatory for us to together take care of environment.
Awesome. I think that's heartening to hear. So, Vidhi, being an environmental lawyer, subtle litigation, reputational risk coming our way in terms of, like you said, the regulators have started looking at data, so they'll be starting to question, needless to say. Once that kind of hits, your consumers are going to ask, saying that, probably a borderline misrepresentation in terms of, what has been said, what are you projecting, basis which I, as a conscious consumer, are buying from you. So there is a reputational risk if something was to go wrong, whether it's on the third party, whether it's our reporting. So what comes out of it from an ESG compliance? What are we bracing internally for that? And you are in an organization which is a lot of consumer focus compliances as such.
Right. So if I talk about ESG governance per se, so what really happens, and like most of the people here are lawyers and some of them are also company secretaries. So it's very important to, of course, align your board with it. So on a quarterly basis, right before a board meeting or in the board meeting, it's important to update your board about what is it that is happening and what your board can also bring in as an insight to kind of implement within the organization. So we have something called an ESG steering committee, which is chaired by our CEO and all the senior leaders in it. And we update them on a quarterly basis as to what we have done. We have identified few ESG metrics, right? One of them being, say, like digital penetration, because we are an insurance company, responsible investment. We have a huge asset under management within us. So, where is all that money that we get from policy holders, where does it actually go? So we do have parameters where, a certain portion will only go to ESG compliant funds. So like we have these ESG metrics and we track them on a quarterly basis. So this ESG steering committee actually deliberates on this on all these ESG metrics on a quarterly basis. But the senior management will only oversee and kind of guide you as to, if something is right or not, and they can provide you guidance. But ESG cannot function in silos. It's not only 2-3 people driving it, only board driving it. It has to be within the organization, everyone doing it. So we have also come up with the ESG working group. Now, ESG working group primarily is, like there's 1 or 2 representation from each function, the procurement, the facility, the HR, the marketing, the IT team, right? So we also generate a lot of e-waste. How is the e-waste getting disposed? We also, are we ensuring that our offices are accessible to the disabled people? Right? So for all of this, there are representations from all these functions. And also from the investment team, like I said, like we do have a lot of investment, the money comes in, but where is it actually getting invested? So that's how the the governance bit is taken care into account, because we also have the investors coming to us and asking questions about a sustainability report if we put it out. So greenwashing, like you have already mentioned, the one thing is that do not say anything which you're not doing. It's as simple as that, So whatever you're saying, just, put it out there, even in our BRSR report, put certain comments, notes, whatever you're doing, just put it out there. It just kind of saves you from any sort of potential litigation threat. Also data being one, because for the service sector, it's also very important that there's, you have a strong cyber security team. So we have a data privacy officer in Access Max who takes care of all the data which is being there. Also now there's a new sort of emerging risk which has come up called climate change litigation. So if you're saying that you're going to be net zero, and you might have heard all these claims, net zero by 2050, like an investor or a stakeholder can walk up to that company and ask that, what's your decarbonization plan? Like how do you intend to, do it by 2050? And if you don't have anything, you are actually inviting, some sort of litigation threat to your organization. So it's again, like I said, if you just kind of replace the nomenclature ESG with responsible business, ethical business, it's easy to actually do it. So if you're doing what you're doing, just say that, and in an ethical manner, if you're operating, I think, you're pretty much still kind of saving yourself from any sort of potential
Right,
risk.
so integrity of intent, integrity of the data, and integrity of communication. At the end of the day, that's what it comes to. So before I ask my panelists final sort of closing questions on what do they think ESG is going to lead, what's their view for the next, 3-5 decade. Any questions for the panelists at this point?
Something on green taxonomy, RTA just announced. Can you just tell us whether it will really enhance the compliance of ESG in India?
So right now it's a draft which has come and the consultation is happening. So in this, of course, what has happened is it has also certain flaws. It has come up with certain principles. 8 principles are laid out in those. And we were part of the CII consultation as the banking and insurance sector where we had put out comments. From the government is the Department of Economics which is leading it. So the consultation has taken place, a lot of comments have gone into it, and it is expected that the government will come up with a slightly more robust sort of taxonomy, because it has invited good and bad sort of, feedback to it. So maybe in the next few months, we can see the final taxonomy, but the government is actually thinking to it. And, in that sense, India has taken a lead, because there are only few countries, jurisdictions, which have thought about it. And India being, one of them. After, we have Australia, which recently came up with a taxonomy, but now it's India. So right now, government is synthesizing all the public consultations which has happened, and CII is one of the, organization, one of the institute which is also helping to kind of synthesize the comments. So from the banking and insurance sector, I know that, it's being considered seriously, and the next few months are critical in coming and seeing, what the final draft will look like.
Wonderful. So Meeru, closing comments from you on